Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
This week, just 3 new releases. Everybody wanted to kind of steer clear for Batman versus Superman, so shorter show this week, but maybe some more in-depth conversation. We're going to do Batman versus Superman, as I mentioned. Also, My Big Fat Greek Wedding 2, and the Netflix original film, Pee-wee's Big Holiday. First up, though, is, of course, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. Let's hear about it, Justin.
Clark Kent, a.k.a. Superman to some people, played by Henry Cavill for the second time around, may have saved the world from the likes of General Zod, but in doing so destroyed and endangered many civilian lives, primarily those employed under Bruce Wayne, also known as Batman, played by Ben Affleck. Over a year later, and thirsty for vengeance, Wayne begins searching for the seemingly omnipotent Superman and bring him down to mortality before the two have to face off against an even greater threat, an eccentric businessman Lex Luthor, played by Jesse Eisenberg. Gal Gadot and Amy Adams also star. There's a perfect metaphor to describe my reaction to this movie about halfway through. In one particular scene, Eisenberg's character is giving a speech, and his tone ranges from trying to be quippy to being really, really dark and paranoid to trying to be poignant, and none of them is resonating with the crowd. And by the end of it, all they do is applaud because they can. Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice just feels like a bunch of underdeveloped, ridiculous ideas thrown in there for the sake of we can become a franchise simply because we can. It's really a collage of everything just about everyone tried to warn Warner about in regards to making a DC universe. Don't follow Marvel's expanded universe ideology. Clearly, they're trying to go completely and utterly for that, and it's not working. I don't understand Cavill's role in this. He feels completely shoehorned, and they try to give him a subplot. It is so minimal, it's not even funny. Calling this battle is probably generous. They, for some reason, try to structure this movie like it's a Rocky film, where it's like, okay, we're going to end on a big fight, but it assumes directly that the audience cares about both individuals' private lives before then. And in some ways, we do. Like, the intro, it's pretty heavy-handed, but I see where they're coming from. I get what they were trying to do, and I respect that. But the 2-hour and 20-minute lead up for literally a conflict that's basically a minor scuffle is, for lack of a better word, generous, until leading to a very, very bloated and frankly horribly shot finale.
So you liked it?
Oh yes, I loved it. But if this is truly the start of a DC universe, Suicide Squad better bring it home.
Well, I mean, it makes sense, because the Justice League is a thing.
It is.
Like you're acting like they are just following Marvel's path because it's successful. I mean, Justice League does exist.
It does, but did they have to do this straight out the gate?
Well, just kind of answering that question, I guess I had a different perspective on it. I don't know if it's perfect. I think it's far from perfect. But I wouldn't say that Warner Brothers is copying Marvel exactly.
Not exactly, but trying to go into the
certainly not in tone.
Well, I mean, they're definitely establishing their own franchise, which makes sense to do. But I think that this is a very different type of franchise and a very different type of superhero movie compared to everything else, which stylistically means that some people may not like it necessarily, but I do have to give it points for daring to do something different in terms of that, because it's just so gritty, and I think a lot of that was purposeful. And I think a lot of people just weren't ready for that, because one of the big reactions seems to be comparing it to the Marvel films and the fact that it's just not like a superhero movie that we typically see as a fun blockbuster, which I can understand, but I do think they're trying to do something different.
But the whole experience is joyless.
I think that's kind of the point. It's supposed to be dark and gritty. And
I mean, that was my big complaint, if you will, with the Dark Knight Rises, or really Man of Steel. Man of Steel...
It's not really that fun.
Wasn't fun at all, and talk about bloated as well. But
it's a different story, though.
That's what they're doing. I mean, that's the path
dark.
They chose to take.
Let's be different from Marvel. Let's just be serious.
Personally, I agree. I don't think it works nearly as well as the Marvel stuff.
but they're not really copying
But
them.
I don't think they're copying them.
not
I just
exactly.
think-
They're copying them in terms of the whole, like, let's give every superhero a movie and we'll try and create this big collage at the end of it.
Yeah, I think.
I mean,
that,
it's not a 100% verbatim aspect.
I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I don't think it's perfect at all, and it's definitely Rocky. The thing is, I guess we'll get into my review. I like
Sure.
see, it's Rocky for sure. This movie created very mixed feelings for me because I think that there's a lot of things about it that I thought were excellent, just as much as I thought there were many things about it that were pretty bad. And I think the whole movie was just kind of a collaboration of that. But I will agree that it's definitely bloated because I think primarily it's focused on as a Batman film. And I think most people agree the Batman stuff is really good, even when you put aside the different reactions to different people. I think a lot of it's been different feelings about different interpretations of certain characters, but we'll put that to the side for what the movie is. It's trying to do a lot, and unfortunately, when they're trying to shoehorn in stuff to establish the Justice League franchise itself, I don't think it works quite as well.
It doesn't gel.
Especially the stuff for the other heroes and the cameos. But the three main characters within the movie, I think their plot kind of comes together fairly well. It's just that the pacing is a big issue because there's just Zack Snyder, I guess you should expect this, but if we really took out the slow motion, this movie would have been like a half an hour shorter, you know. But I know that's his style, and I'm not saying it didn't work. I mean, like, for instance, an example of the stylistic elements working for me really well were like some of the Batman stuff. Like the opening sequence, I thought was awesome. I mean, over the top, maybe. Subtle, no. But it's beautifully shot recreation of the origin done over the credits and actually factored into the main plot and the growth of a particular character. So certain things do work really well. The problem is there's a lot of gaps in between where it's either dull or messy or unfocused. But the tone at least was consistent, and I think the main plot works.
Well, I mean, you used the word excellent to describe certain things, and I can't say anything about this movie's excellent. But I do think that a lot of the criticism is a little bit unjust. I think people are hating on this movie to hate on it.
That's what it sounds like.
It's true.
To borrow a Justin phrase, because they can.
That's what it seemed like to me.
Personally, I think Ben Affleck was fine. I knew he would be fine. I like Ben Affleck. I thought he was a good part of this movie. Eisenberg, though,
Pretty much
again,
the worst.
I knew would be awful, and he was.
Pretty bad, yeah.
He's far and away the worst part of the movie, acting-wise.
I would actually give it to Godot, to be honest with you.
Gal Gadot doesn't do anything.
She doesn't have to really do it to really say she's
Joe
bad.
called this, Joe said the three main characters. She's not even the third main character. The third main character is like Lawrence Fishburne or something. I mean, it's really Batman, Superman,
Yeah.
and then sort of off to the side is Wonder Woman, and then
Yep.
kind of Amy Adams is there, and Lawrence Fishburne is there.
Yeah.
And
There's like a couple
know,
more human characters.
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
about it.
she barely appears, so I can't even say she was bad or good. I thought she did okay in the one scene she was Wonder Woman.
I mean, her
Yeah.
accent is just so thick. There are moments where I was literally
know.
listening to her dialogue thinking, what the heck are you trying to say?
Well, speaking of the dialogue, though, there were a couple times when I thought Ben Affleck's dialogue was very guttural, and not even when he was Batman, when he was being Bruce Wayne.
It's true.
And one was a sound mixing issue because the score was overpowering his
I'm glad you brought that
line.
up, actually.
It was only one time, but there was another time where he was just being very quiet.
Batman.
Acting, but he wasn't. He was Bruce Wayne in that scene.
Yes.
When he's Batman, I
But
expect.
damn, they're one and the same.
Listen, I don't really like Zack Snyder. I think he is very overrated. You guys know I don't like Watchmen. You like Man of Steel, I think, both better than I did. But my big issue, at least pacing-wise for this movie, is the first maybe like half hour, except for that opening scene that you mentioned, Joe, which is great with Batman.
Yeah.
They all sort of seem like half scenes.
I couldn't agree more.
Right?
Yeah.
It was like 40 seconds to do this, and then it shifts gears, and then, a minute and a half here. But, like, there was no real context for any of it. It just did not, like, gel together at all until probably a good 30 to 40 minutes in. You didn't feel that, I guess.
Not really.
Okay.
No, I mean...
I'm just trying to- can you
Actually,
give-
because of that, it became almost a nightmare to try and keep up with, because it's like, Batman story, Lois Lane subplot. Then we're back with Clark Kent for a scene. trying to make him not this overly stoic character.
The first really good scene I thought in the movie was when Holly Hunter went to see Jesse Eisenberg at his home. I thought that was the first time that we got an actual full scene of this movie.
I think that they were cutting a lot of scenes for pacing. It didn't bother me. I followed the story pretty well, actually.
Well, it's not that I couldn't follow it. It's just that it just didn't...
Too quick?
Yeah, like there wasn't a lot of
time to
basis
sit down.
to care.
All right, I agree that, yes, had they given a couple scenes to establish Alfred, for instance, to make you care more about him, that would be great. But nobody's here to, develop the Alfred Bruce contemporary again. We've seen.
Strangely enough, he's
who it is.
He's like the one character in the entire movie that shoots for humor, and it kind of works.
I think speaking to that, I guess you could say that's a flaw, like in terms of the film itself. You can't argue. But literally, the point of this movie, the audience that's spoken for, they will know enough to care. I mean, I don't think that's really a massive
They
flaw.
will, but there still has to be a story that goes with that. And I think it's interesting that you brought up the whole Man of Steel thing, because this does not feel like a worthy follow-up to Man of Steel. It feels like a Batman movie where Superman's more or less of a supporting character.
Which would be a correct statement. I mean, it's not a proper sequel to Man of Steel. It's more of a commentary on Man of Steel. It's a Batman movie. That's what it is. It's a Batman movie.
I mean, it feels more like a spin-off than a sequel.
That's true. It does. It's a Batman movie, and I just don't think they could have called it that. But it's a Batman story, which is why Superman really is shoehorned, unfortunately.
Well, I feel like maybe Justin's big complaint with the Marvel copycatting, if you will, is that, all those Marvel characters had a couple of movies.
It's true.
I mean, the Hulk maybe not so much, but, Iron Man, Thor, and here we had one Man of Steel movie, and then a completely separate Batman trilogy from another director that has nothing to do with this.
Right.
So really, there was one movie before. I mean, is that part of your issue with it, Justin? Is that it seems
Well, I mean, the
like
problem
they're
is,
rushing it to rush it?
The problem is,
Well, they are.
I don't think you needed
They
to. I think it would have been okay to pull a Guardians of the Galaxy and just introduce the characters in one gigantic crossover. But in this case, it's like they wanted this to originally just be a Batman and Superman movie.
Yeah.
And then decided, oh wait, it has to be Justice League. Well, how do we work this? Hopefully, we can get back to the whole Batman and Superman thing.
Well, listen,
later.
I think it's going to be just as bad with Civil War.
You think so? I don't think about that, because think about how
I mean,
established
I'm
those
already
characters
worried
are.
about Civil War.
They are established, but I mean, Justin's talking about throwing in all the characters from all the different franchises, and that's obviously what Civil War is about, because it has to be.
Minus Thor and Hulk, yeah.
I guess, but you're throwing Spider-Man in, and a
Well,
bunch of side characters from those movies.
Dan, that's the inevitable conclusion. Infinity War, they said, is going to have hundreds of characters.
And I've been saying it for a year now.
And I think
it's
the Russo brothers are
overkill.
going to face the same fate as Zack Snyder is for this movie. He got stuck with these ridiculous requests, and I think critics and fans are going to skewer him for it.
I agree that had this movie just been a Batman versus Superman movie and had Superman had more balance, it would have been a stronger movie.
I couldn't agree more.
It's a Justice League movie, too. It's what we have.
It's basically Justice League prologue.
It is. It's a Justice League prequel, and, I think that the little bit of Wonder Woman I saw, I was happy with. I think she looks the part. I thought her acting was fine. I mean, you're right. There's very little.
There's very little of her, so it's
and
whatever.
She's also supposed to be from Greece or something.
How did
so.
you feel about Lex Luthor, though?
Do I need to?
Because we've
talk
talked.
about it?
We've talked.
All
I
right,
know,
all
but
right.
we talked about it before we watched
all
it.
right. This is
Jesse Eisenberg's terrible.
Jesse Eisenberg was bad casting for Lex Luthor.
Yes, he was.
In terms of a villain for the story and how he functions, he's fine. But his portrayal sucks. Because it's not Lex Luthor, and it's also very inconsistent.
Well, I mean,
Ben
Affleck basically betrays everything that's about Batman in that regard. Like, he's supposed to be this analytical detective, and yet he gets manipulated so ridiculously easily throughout the duration of the film.
And unfortunately, to add stakes, you kind of would have to have that happen. You're getting them to see them fight each other. It just makes sense. Plus, to be fair, he does more detective movies in this movie than he did in the entire Dark Knight trilogy.
I'm not denying that.
So
That is true.
And in terms of him being the bigger, tougher, more forward Batman, it's the Dark Knight Returns Batman. He's off the deep end.
It's true.
No real problems with that.
But
that direction.
But it's weird because they were trying to do that, and then they decided, no, he's still got some more humanity to him than that.
Well, I'm glad they did, because otherwise by the end it would have just been Batman and Superman hating each other, and then there wouldn't be a Justice League. So, hey, the way that he turned around and became sane again, I thought was fine.
All right, well, let's get to the grades. Justin sounds like he's probably on the lowest end of the three of us.
You never know. He could surprise me.
Well, I mean, despite Wooden, Affleck, and Godot
What?
being Godot, there were some aspects of this that I like. I may change this grade after seeing Suicide Squad later on this year, but for right now, it's a D+.
Why would a Suicide Squad change it?
Like, if there's payoff giving me hope for the franchise,
Okay.
I could justify a D+. If it sucks, it'll probably be a D.
Well, I mean, I know I'm probably being generous, but I will say after this movie, I do think there's potential. Like, I'm looking forward to the Wonder Woman movie. I leave it with a B-.
Okay, well, I'm smack dab in between you both with a C. I think it's very, very messy and overly long for no reason.
It's pretty long.
Basically.
It is. All right, well, Joe, let's hear about My Big Fat Greek Wedding 2.
I mean, there's almost no reason to even give a synopsis for this one because it's essentially the same movie, just bigger and Greeker.
Much Greeker.
Much Greeker. Basically, in this one, we have the same characters from the original, which was a pretty big hit, actually. A surprise hit back in the day.
Yes, the still the biggest indie film ever.
And I believe it was also nominated for a screenplay, right?
Yes.
But this time we follow along with the main character. Tula, played by Nia Vardalos, who basically wrote this based on her own family experiences once again, is kind of taking off with her. She's been married with Ian Miller, and they have been married for a while, and of course they live right next to their family, and she has a daughter now who is planning to go off to college, and there's this big debate about whether or not to keep her around the family, but she wants to get away because her family is, of course, Tula's family, and they're beyond suffocating, and she's thinking about possibly going out of town. And there's Tula trying to keep her own marriage together, keep it spicy, while dealing with her own family's dilemmas as we find out that her mother and father, who have been pressing the importance of marriage her whole life, may not in fact be married, hence planning another big fat Greek wedding. Now, I kind of like this movie. It's sort of one of the family favorites of mine growing up. I watched this one plenty of times, can always find a good laugh. It's good, wholesome, relatively harmless fun. I think it's a very unique sense of comedy that isn't really out to offend anybody, except maybe if you're Greek, I'm not sure. But I think Greeks actually do like it.
I think it's very lovingly tongue-in-cheek to Greeks.
To Greek
Yeah.
satire,
Yeah.
and really just, any ethnic
I think
family
they get it.
can relate to that if you have that kind of history. But, I think the core values are still there, and I think that the main formula of the Greek wedding is still the movie, but they literally amp everything up. Like, for instance, one of the running gags in the first movie was how kooky the ancient grandmother is, and she's in so many scenes in this movie. Just as an example, which at first is funny, but you're like, how many times are you going to use this same gag? And you've got the Windex gag again. You've got quoting all the words come back to Greek again 10 times, and you've got her crazy aunt who's in the movie
fan service callbacks, Joe.
far more. And fan service callbacks are fine, but literally like one of the old jokes would have been fine, and give us some new material. Give us some new material, and like I said, I can't say that laughing based on the older jokes that have already been said is kind of funny, but you could just watch the first movie. Now, the plot of this one, I guess, does kind of sort of follow along as a sequel to the original, but most of the most interesting aspects, primarily Tula and her husband's relationship and its struggle, as well as her daughter's dilemma, are the two most interesting parts of the movie, which aren't really explored that much. They feel like they're half
They're
done.
more of side plots.
Really to the main plot, which
Yeah.
isn't really that intriguing. I mean, it's kind of funny, but any moments of real good comedy or even good drama within it are once again stunted because the movie's just so short, and you've got three different plots that are half developed anyway. So what you get is basically a kind of funny, unnecessary sequel that pretty much does everything the first movie did, just not quite as well, and just amps everything and more repetitive. So if you like the first one, you'll probably like this one, but if you never saw it, you're not really missing a whole lot. Mm-hmm. So what do you guys think?
Well, I'd like to hear from Justin because he didn't ever see the first one until this week. I've not seen it in a while, but I have certainly seen it, and you said you've seen it a lot, Joe.
Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah.
So I'm more interested in what Justin has to say
Because
than
Justin's kind of the
myself speaking.
resident unique person when it comes to comedies of various disciplines.
I would agree.
So normally when we have one of these sequels that are sort of unnecessary, I usually open up with something along the lines of, did anyone really want this? But in the case of My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which has a huge cult following, and I know many people who love it, it was definitely warranted by fans, so I can't really say that this time around. However, I do think the first film is good, but alarmingly overrated.
Uh-oh. Why is it
Particularly
overrated?
because it hits home the same disturbing message Grease did, and still kind of creeps me out in that regard. But at least that one had something going on.
Wait, Grease the movie with John Travolta?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
That if you just marry
If
a
you
man
truly
who-
love someone, change your entire lifestyle for them. But,
Oh, I thought you were talking about it in terms of its family. I didn't
No,
understand
no,
the
no.
reference.
Smoke and
All
you'll
right.
be cool and, you know.
But at least the first one had something going on. Two story, to be frank, might be generous to call it a story,
It is pretty barely there.
could literally be told, resolved, and be a complete arc in about 40 minutes or less. And really, all the other stuff that's going on in there is recycled fan service. Some of it's funny, a lot of it isn't. Shoehorned in cameos. And really just keeps coming up with random scenes to play for time so it can reach feature length. And because of that, the film suffers tremendously. A lot of the charm is still there, but the lack of polish really does stick out like a sore thumb.
Well, I'll tell you why he thinks it's overrated, Joe, because it's been 15 years of build-up. I mean, you know, if you have that sort of pedigree going, it is hard to
Live up to it.
watch it and understand what all the hype is. I mean, I know I felt that way with movies like Say Anything and Princess Bride and, you know, other movies along the way.
Well, it's like everyone was mentioning it as like, oh, it was this great comedy, and it's funny, but there's nothing really that stand out about it. There's nothing that's groundbreaking, even though. And honestly, another big criticism I have about this, the first one showed us enough of the family that they didn't quite reach caricature territory. They gave us just the right amount. And here, the family is such a big deal that they almost turn into these like cartoonish stereotypes, to the point that it suffers tremendously once it gets wackier and wackier and wackier for basically no better reason than because the plot demands it.
Well, I think the problem is that because based on the success of the film, there was the short-lived TV series, you know, and who knows if, you know, maybe the marriage subplot, oh, hey, my parents aren't married, maybe that was a gag that Vardalos had thought of for the TV show that never came to fruition because it only lasted, 8 episodes or whatever it was.
Right.
And a lot of this does sort of seem very sitcom-y in that regard. But I do think there's some funny jokes here. I think that the most interesting part of the story, you're right, Joe, I think even above the daughter storyline is the Nia Vardalos and John Corbett storyline.
Yeah.
Their marriage, I think, is the most interesting. And I would say of the three, it's the one we spend the least time with.
Uh-huh.
The daughter's okay. I sort of like the daughter-boyfriend sort of dynamic.
Yeah.
But there just isn't a ton to write home about. I certainly did laugh.
As did I.
But I mean, Justin, I don't know that this is more or less justified than something like a Zoolander. I mean, that also has a very good cult following. I mean, I think this is a better movie, but I also thought the first one was a better movie.
And I would agree.
I mean, I definitely think that the fan base was here for this movie, although I don't necessarily know that they were clamoring for a second one. You look at a movie like Zoolander or Anchorman, the fan base is young and invested in movies, and the older crowd that this movie is aiming for, I think, is probably satisfied watching the first one a 10th time rather than going to see another one.
Probably.
Ordinarily, I would agree, but I remember shortly after the first one came out and made a killing, there was all these talks about, oh, we're going to do more with it. Obviously, the TV series happened.
Which nobody watched.
Which
by the
nobody
way.
watched, obviously.
There
But
you go.
But obviously,
There
there
you
was
go.
still mention
So-
of like, oh, are they going to do a sequel then because the show tanked? Which obviously didn't come much later. But
Well, I mean,
I don't think there was a rabid
Yeah.
fan base that's like, we have to get another Greek movie. Like, I think people were just satisfied, watching it personally. But obviously, there was enough interest to see it
yes,
if they made a sequel.
yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah.
agree.
But
and I think you're right, Joe. I think people that enjoy the first movie will also enjoy this one, probably to a lesser degree.
Yeah.
But they'll probably enjoy seeing everybody back on the screen.
Yeah.
Justin, what do you think?
I'm leaving this one with a C minus.
Joe?
A little higher. C.
All right, I'm just a shade higher than that, C+. All right, well, we close with the Netflix original film Pee-wee's Big Holiday, and this sees Paul Reubens reprise his classic Pee-wee character from the 80s and on in the first feature-length movie in decades, where he basically realizes that his life in Fairview may not be as exciting as it could be after he meets Joe Manganiello playing himself from True Blood and the Magic Mike films. And he convinces Pee-wee to drop everything and go to New York for Joe's birthday party. And along the way, as you would imagine, Pee-wee meets some very interesting and colorful characters. The thing I like maybe the most about Pee-wee is that unlike any other character that I can think of who has a series of films or TV shows or whatever, Pee-wee really is whatever he wants to be. Obviously, in the context of this film, there is no Pee-wee's Playhouse, and he's never been on the Pee-wee's Big Adventure. He is just Pee-wee, and here's his backstory. It is, he lives in Fairview. And, you know, to me, that's good enough. I mean, that's why I think the character has endured for decades, because he's sort of like a cartoon character in that regard. You know, Bugs Bunny can sort of go and do whatever he wants with no continuity to previous things that he's done.
Right.
I think the movie is funny for what it is. It doesn't tread on a lot of new ground, obviously, but it is a very family-friendly, as Pee-wee, you know, typically is, type of adventure movie. But Joe, I'm most intrigued about how you think of this movie, because you have heard of the Pee-wee character, but didn't grow up watching him, you know, never seen the Playhouse or any of the movies.
Well, that's not entirely true.
Okay.
I saw Pee-wee's Big Adventure,
Oh, okay, all right.
which I thought was okay.
Okay. So you do have some sort of a basis.
Yeah, and that was a while ago.
Okay. Because I find that the humor works sometimes in this movie, other times it's trying a little too hard. But I think mainly this movie is for kids and for nostalgia purposes for adults.
Definitely.
You know, like if I was to watch this movie with zero attachment to the Pee-wee character, I probably would have really hated it. So,
Probably
so what
accurate.
do you think, Joe?
Well, I always try to give things the benefit of a doubt.
True.
I mean, I never really hated the Pee-wee character. I thought the movie was interesting. Much like the previous one, I thought it was weird, but not quite as good as that one, honestly. Because I thought there was just more. Well, it was Tim Burton, so there was
That
more.
was a great Burton film,
There was
yes.
some
Yeah.
more weird, surrealistic things happening, which I thought made it stand out, and even its inconsistencies. This one I thought was more consistent. And it seemed like it fit based upon the experience of Pee-wee and how he generally acts. And I think he's an okay character. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Mr. Bean in a lot of ways.
Okay.
I can see it.
Some similarities there. That kind of character, which, you know, if it's designed for younger kids and it's relatively harmless, I think that's okay. But from what I understand, Pee-wee wasn't originally like that. Wasn't he kind of more adult-oriented?
He was a bit more adult-oriented, really until the movies. Yeah, he was a character that Reubens had sort of trotted out on stage. I don't know if it was in stand-up or on a Broadway sort of show thing. I know he did do a Broadway show before Playhouse, but yes, it was a little bit more adult-oriented. And I think because of the success of the kids show, sort of like the Muppets. I mean, the Muppets were a very adult sort of thing when they first started. Not very adult, but I mean more
A little
adult, more
Right.
adult than Muppets Take Manhattan per se.
Yeah.
Probably.
No, I guess that maybe diluted him a little more from the potential of how funny he could be. I think some of the jokes worked. Like, I liked some of the obvious references, but you're right. I don't really feel any nostalgic attachment to it at all.
Right.
So I hope it's better for some people. For me, I just thought it was okay. I thought a lot of the jokes were kind of unfunny, to be honest, though.
Okay.
Just I could see
Ooh.
some endearing qualities, but it was all right.
What about the vignette nature of it? Because obviously he's hitchhiking his way to New York, so he meets different characters along the way.
I liked some of the side characters, like the three ladies. I thought were pretty cool. I saw some Brooklyn
Yes.
Nine-Nine.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine,
yeah,
alumni
Leah
there.
Shawkat was in there.
So
from,
I liked some of the supporting people. I liked True Blood guy with Joe.
Yep, Joe Manganiello.
Unpronounceable
He was good.
Italian name. Yeah, he was good.
I actually, if I'm being honest, I expected more cameos.
As did I, actually.
Not Zoolander style.
Well, no.
I mean, we all can't be. And by the way, quick aside: can Neil deGrasse Tyson say no to something? Because he was in Batman and Superman too.
Well, he's big now.
Yes, I know he is, but
Well, I liked it
Come
when
on.
they went to Lancaster. It was pretty cool.
yeah, that
Pee-wee,
was good.
He has like his Amish.
Yeah,
farm.
the Amish people.
I think it was. I think it's okay. I think it's harmless. It's not out to hurt anybody. I think that for the right audience, it's fine.
Okay.
But I don't think it's probably the best that Pee-wee's ever had to offer either.
No, but compared to the other family film that Netflix has put out, which is The Ridiculous Six,
Ouchie.
I think we could admit this is all better than that,
Well,
right?
I would have a hard
Considerably,
time
yes.
considering the Ridiculous Six as family film is kind of a
Well,
stretch anyway.
family film in the Sandler
Camp?
PG-13 way of
Yeah.
being family-oriented, I guess, like grown-ups. Justin, what did you think of Pee-wee?
I'm very surprised to notice that Big Top Pee-wee remained absent in your reference list.
I've actually not seen Big Top Pee-wee.
Neither have I.
It's one of the few Pee-wee items I have not seen.
What's that?
It was the film he made after Big Adventure, and I think either right before Playhouse started or maybe like between the first and second seasons. And it's highly regarded as a big, terrible movie.
Huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So
one of
I've
the
never
monsters.
come around to seeing it.
But I think Pee Wee is very much set in his innermost politic, being this basically whimsical man-child. And I think for some people that's going to work really, really well, and they'll embrace it sort of in the same way people embrace the first Dumb and Dumber. And I think for some it's just going to become the lowest of the lowbrow and ridiculous and obnoxious. But I think the more one's willing to commit to that, the more fun this movie becomes. I thought Manganiello did a very good job
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
buying into this whole setup. It's very simple, but it's also very effective because it's that simple. Not all the vignettes work, but it's always curious to see how they're going to play out later. And some of the callbacks actually are quite nice.
And luckily, they don't stay too long on any one of them.
No, and I like that. There's
No more than maybe 4 or 5 minutes.
pretty much. There's a really nice smooth balance. There was one near the end of the second half I wasn't overly crazy about.
I think
but,
the Amish one ran too long.
I was actually not real crazy about the Farmer Brown one, to be honest with you.
Oh, that's what I was thinking of. The one with the daughters.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I was confusing
No,
with
no,
the
it's-
Amish farmer Amish.
Yeah, there are some multiple
Yeah,
plots.
you're right.
Yeah.
The Farmer Brown one was the one that ran a little long.
Is Pee-wee typically like a catch for the ladies? Was that kind of the gag?
Yes, so the ladies always came around the playhouse and brought him treats and called him on the phone.
I bet they
and
did.
They did.
But no, I thought this was a very take it for what it is kind of movie, and by that logic, I think it works. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Pee-wee's Big Adventure will probably always be the be all end all. I've only seen parts of that, but I was a huge fan of Playhouse. But I think for return to form, you can do a whole lot worse.
I thought that opening scene was hilarious.
Oh my gosh, yes.
When he woke up and was riding down the street and everything. I thought that was funny. I thought that set the pace very nicely and set the tone for the rest of the film.
Definitely.
All right, well, let's go with the grades.
I'm giving this one a B.
Joe?
C+.
All right, it's a B for me as well. All right, well, that will do it for the show. No shorter, really, than normal because of the Batman chatter. I sort of figured that might be the case. But next week we'll be back with a full 4-film docket for you. And gearing up towards summer, of course. And you can check out our Star Trek reviews. We have our DC month old classic reviews up. And spring cleaning is our topic for April. So if you've had something that maybe you've mentioned to us before, hit us with it again. We do have, obviously, some old standards lying around that we have not gotten to yet from you guys, but never hurts to let us know again. And you can join the Facebook group, which is Film Fanatics with an exclamation point, and the Twitter feed at Film Fanatics Pod. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you back here next time.